Now we're going to be transitioning over to Jeffrey Laine. We have been working together for approximately 9 years. We're currently on the same team. We get the nice, easy schedule of Monday through Thursday, and we get to be day walkers. So Jeff was part of the narcotics enforcement team, and he's got some great insight and experience as far as the drug trade. And we're having him talk to the issue of now that cartels are being designated as foreign terrorist organizations. Um, what does that mean for us? And what does that mean for Mexico and on a grander scale? Because there's a lot of fingers in that pie, a lot of different countries involved. And so we just want to kind of shift gears into that. And I'll let Jeff introduce himself how he sees appropriate. So, Jeff, take it away.
Yeah, thank you guys very much for the opportunity to be here. Um, it's really cool, kind of full circle moment for me, being a graduate of San Diego State from the political science program and international security and conflict resolution program. So it's really humbling and just a fun opportunity to kind of converse with you guys and talk about some upcoming things that there's a lot of unknowns about. So it's going to be interesting to see how it's going to play out, and I kind of look forward to your guys' comments and insight and thoughts about what's going on and what may happen in the near future and long term as well. So just a little bit kind of the agenda today for my presentation. Just I'll give a brief intro, history of cartels, the drug trafficking organizations, the culture, narco cultura kind of surrounding the drug trafficking organizations, a little bit about narcoterrorism, and then kind of the hot topic right now is the cartel is being designated as a foreign terrorist organization and some of the tactics they use and how they are similar to a conventional terrorist organization, such as Al-Qaeda, and show some recent cases that happened, in San Diego and specifically in Chula Vista, where Nate and I work. Just a little bit about me. Like I said, graduated, got my bachelor's degree from San Diego State. Switched sides, went across town and get my master's from the University of San Diego in international relations, and I'm looking forward to starting my PhD here in the fall. Been with Chula Vista a little over 9 years. I spent most of the last 5 years working narcotics. Unfortunately, all good things must come to an end, and in our organization, there's a term limit, and I recently had the privilege and to promote, but every time you promote, you got to go back to patrol and pay your dues. So that's where I am now. I'm actually enjoying it though. It's a lot of fun, kind of getting back to my roots of policing. But I do hope to go back to a task force, a narcotics task force in the near future. I also have been assigned to the SWAT team for the last 7 years. So I have a little bit of tactical experience, which often kind of influences a lot of things I do on the investigative side as well. Most importantly, my favorite job is being a husband, a dad, and a dog dad to my black lab, Lily, who I love dearly. So a little history of the cartels. Most of us know who Pablo Escobar is, kind of had his reign beginning in the early 80s. He's the one who really expanded relations with Mexico smugglers to get drugs into the United States. At the time, they were mostly utilizing kind of the eastern South Florida side to smuggle in dope. And Pablo most famously implemented his policy of plata o plomo, uh, which is essentially officials can accept bribes and his money, or they'll get the lead, a bullet for not cooperating with him and allowing his drugs to pass through. Um, as a result of all the, specifically mostly cocaine and marijuana coming in through South Florida, a South Florida task force was established to combat all the cocaine. Um, Most famously, most people know it as kind of the cocaine cowboys of the 80s. Also in the 80s, we saw the rise of the Guadalajara cartel, the Federation, which was essentially a combination of multiple plazas or cartels or families operating in Mexico that were all responsible for a specific territory uh, in Mexico. However, when the Federation crumbled in the 80s with the rest of Miguel Angel Felix, and as a result of the kidnapping of DE agent Kiki Camarena, um, the families all kind of broke off on their own and established their own cartels. Present day cartels, of course, the Sinaloa, you have the El Mayo and Los Chapito factions. From my sources, it sounds like Sinaloa has significantly lost a lot of power in the drug trafficking game. I mean, they're still obviously perennial and doing their thing, but after El Mayo was arrested, CJNG really has taken a stronghold all over the world. CJNG is Cartel Jalisco Nuevo Generacion, of course, led by El Mencho, who is one of the disappeared ones. And of course, you have CDN, Cartel del Noreste. They mostly operate in Nuevo Laredo. Ariano Felix as well. They had a stronghold in Tijuana. They really lost a significant amount of power. We've seen a little bit of an increase in CAF operatives, um, but again, CJNG really has a stronghold, and from what I understand, I've been hearing and seeing, CJNG has really moved into Tijuana as well. And then Cartel de Golfo, they're in kind of operate in the northeastern part of Mexico. And then some notable others. You have the Los Zetas. They're the paramilitary enforcement arm of CDN and CDG. And Los Rojos, they operate in South Mexico, kind of in Juarez. And a lot of these people are the Sicario wings and the like kidnapping wings um, of these drug trafficking organizations that carry out a lot of the violence.
So Jeff, sorry to interrupt. For people that don't really know much about the structure of the cartels, do you have any sort of um, common language of how to kind of describe the structure? What kind of people are involved in the cartels? Are these like paramilitary people? Are they prior military? Are they just business people? Are they store owners? Um,
Yeah, the answer is really all the above. The way the organizations work, they're highly compartmentalized. So they typically operate in smaller cells. So that way, if one cell is taken down, um, other cells are still in operation. Um, and I'll kind of get to the profile of the narco culture, what kind of makes somebody up. But yes, the answer is all those people. There is a lot of motivations for why somebody gets involved. Most notably, number one, obviously, is going to be money. But a kind of overlooked aspect of being part of a drug trafficking organization is just simply the prestige. We see it just, people wanting to look like people in the music videos, throwing money around, driving fancy cars, wearing the body armor, having the weapons. So that plays into it as well.
Got it. Great. So just it could be if you're in Mexico, it could be your neighbor, it could be somebody that's living up on top of the hill, and all of the above.
Yeah, part of the culture, which again I'll kind of get to, is a lot of the members are outward about their association, right, with the clothing and the cars that they drive and all that. But a good crook, would want to blend in, right, and not make themselves known to kind of operate and fly under the radar. But the culture is to be proud of your heritage and your organization and who you represent.
Got it. Cool. Thank you.
No problem. Just working through the next slide here. Okay, again, this one. So talking about a little cultura, the culture. There's some aspects we commonly see among drug trafficking organizations. One of them, most notably, is Jesus Malverde, the patron saint of narcos. He is essentially viewed as a sort of Robin Hood. He took from the rich and gave to the poor. So oftentimes, if we were to serve a search warrant at a drug trafficker's house, you may see this statue above of Jesus Malverde, and essentially they'll pray to him that he protects their goods and protects a safe transport of the drugs as well. So, just a little disclaimer: by no means is this probable cause for us to search somebody, but it may be an indicator if this person is in fact involved in drug trafficking. And then, of course, the corridos, narcos corridos, which glorifies and glamorizes narco drug traffickers. I'll play some of the music. This one in particular is for El Chapo, and it just gives praise to him and the things he's done. Again, kind of looking at him as almost like a Robin Hood, um, taken from the rich and given to the poor.
Un objetivo y vendió naranjas cuando era un plebillo. Con su fe bien puesta siguió su camino, sin miedo a la vida, sin miedo al peligro. Con un objetivo y vendió naranjas cuando era un plebillo. Su fe bien puesta siguió su camino, sin miedo a la vida, sin miedo al peligro.
Again, it's just kind of glorifying him, talking about his struggle growing up and how he was poor and lived in the mountains and how he became somebody. So another aspect we'll see often, is the junior narcos, right? These are heavily recruited by the drug trafficking organizations, and these are the ones that are, younger, trying to make a name for themselves, coming up in the drug trafficking world. So they're the ones that are going to be outward and very proud of their affiliation, and they're going to, wear things like the 701 El Chapito hat you see there on the screen. So what that represents, at what point Forbes named El Chapo the 701st richest person in the world. So specifically in Sinaloa and other places in Mexico, you'll see people wearing the 701 hat. Typically, again, certain clothing are associated. Kind of the designer brands are very hot, particularly with the junior narcos. The Psycho Bunny, Express, Armani, Fox. These are all kind of subcultures within narco cultura. Also within drug traffickers, they typically have an affinity for going out to the desert as well. quad side by side. So that's kind of where the Fox brand clothing comes in. It's just part of the culture, what you do on the weekends. And then also see a lot of drug traffickers eating at Morisco's restaurants. This is where a lot of business deals, higher level business deals will go down. I've also seen it after, while on surveillance, after maybe a successful drug deal goes down, in a long-term operation where we're not, just taking somebody down right away, they may go celebrate the success of their trafficking or dealing by eating at a Morisco's. And another, it's not just drugs that these organizations are involved in. Human smuggling has huge profit potential as well. I know they've got involved in fuel, tortilla, and avocado thefts as well as mining. During the last year, I was working narcotics. We were involved in a case where people were being brought over. Initially, it was thought it was drugs, so that's why we were involved in it. But people were being brought over on little motor, like paramotors, flying in over the border. Be one operator with it on their back, and then maybe the person that was being smuggled in would essentially be strapped to them, and they would be landing right here in Chula Vista in our backyard. So just kind of food for thought. That's a little scary to think about. That person that was being smuggled in, that could be anybody, right? That could be terrorist, or it could be somebody who's wanted in Mexico for murders. It could be a variety of things, but just scary to think the ease at which at that time, at least, somebody would be able to get into the country. So I want to talk about kind of how we came to know what narco terrorism is, right? If we look at terrorism as, using violence to achieve a political goal, this right here, what Pablo Escobar did with the Avianca Flight 203, there was a presidential candidate, Cesar Gaviria, who was staunchly in support of extradition and eradicating drug trafficking. So Escobar had bombs put on the plane to blow up the plane, right? So if Gaviria can't be president, he can't support the extradition. But it turned out Gaviria was not on that plane, so 107 innocent people died as a result of Pablo Escobar using this violence to try and achieve his political goal. Most recently, you have the Battle of Culiacan here. This was just a few years ago, October 17th. Essentially, one of El Chapo's sons, one of the El Chapitos, was arrested by authorities. The sicarios stormed the streets, were burning things down, shooting at Mexican police and military. So then the president, Manuel Lopez Obrador, MLO, ordered the release of one of the Chapitos, right? So enough violence had been done around Culiacan that the president thought that by releasing Chapo's son, that the violence would stop. So here's another instance of violence being used to achieve a political goal. And again, this is just my opinion. That's essentially negotiating with a terrorist. You're getting in dangerous water. It shows that this government is willing to essentially negotiate with terrorists if terrorists start inciting violence. achieve their political goal.
Yeah, Jeff, I think one of the things that we're seeing now, especially with the changeover administrations, is their view of lack of resolve there. And I know that, I mean, it's so interesting that we're having this conversation because, I mean, daily there are just changes, you know, with regard to the cartel, how they're adapting. Of course, we've inserted our own, you know, military operatives as well, you know, and layering or merging what was just a law enforcement sort of a perspective and approach. And now we're adding in our own military, probably at least more, you know, in an intelligence platform. But certainly violence is a way to control people, right?
Yep.
We're seeing that now. So, you know, I don't wonder what your thoughts are, and I'm sure the answer is probably yes. We're going to see more violence, more transitioning to see how these we'll see how America deals with this as well. But you know, at the same time, posturing by the cartels to respond to this added pressure in the region, and obviously San Diego is so close and just such a major transshipment point, port of entry for drugs, you know, flowing into the United States. I mean, we're just really at a pivotal point, I think, in time, seeing where, you know, this might take us. But personally, I think there's going to be more violence and more of an understanding, you know, within this new administration to the action that they're going to have to take, in combination with, I would think, cooperation with Mexico. But you're exactly right. I mean, this is not indicating any kind of resolve when you're ordering the release of this individual. So very interesting.
Yeah, it just, you know, makes you wonder how, you know, how high the levels of corruption go. I mean, it's no secret there's a lot of corruption in Mexico and coordination with the drug trafficking organizations. But I know maybe at the time MLO, you know, believed what he was doing was, you know, to stop the killing and the violence, but which is a short-term goal, obviously, but the long-term implications of that may outweigh, you know, the short-term goals.
Yeah, I think Lorch had a question.
Yeah, well, more of a comment. Jeff,
Yeah,
when you're describing the sort of narco culture and the degree to which it's almost flaunted in a lot of cases, that really highlights both the audacity and the degree
yes,
of impunity with which these organizations are functioning. But tying it back to some of the stuff I was talking about earlier about the gradual movement towards extremism, it really does highlight how much the culture of the sort of narco culture has pervaded every aspect of life. And although most people won't be violent, they're not going to, actually become a sicario. It does a very similar thing that we see within the extremist mindset, where it becomes a lot more socially acceptable to walk around wearing a hat with a picture of a pistol on it, or says 701. It becomes so much more accepted. And so when something like this happens, the Battle of Culiacan, yes, people are going to be hurt, people are going to be killed, but it's considered, somewhat acceptable because this is just part of the culture there. And, any attempt, such as, releasing Ovidio Guzman, attempting to, releasing him in an attempt to stop the killing, that's all it's going to do is perpetuate that idea, that sense that this is part of the culture and it's acceptable, and we're just going to keep going with it.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, thank you for your comments. You're exactly right. One thing I'll touch on in a little bit is, maybe an unintended consequence of designating these, TCOs and drug trafficking organizations as FTOs is if we have military intervention, in Mexico, and you start, unfortunately, to see stuff like this, and inevitably there's going to be casualties and unintended targets of potentially civilians. we may see, an influx of asylum seekers, essentially trying to escape, a quote unquote war zone, right? So there's always the potential for that.
Yeah, you know what? I'm glad you brought that up. And that was the exact point in last year's webinar we had with NCITE. And that was a takeaway from CBP and the director of their intelligence unit as, for every action, there's a reaction. What does that look like? And his pause and concern was at the end of our webinar last year was that very fact. What will people do? How will people respond? How will the public respond to this? And will this offer an avenue, of a potential escape and an increase in the asylum seeking as a result of them escaping this new terrorist designation, and what does that look like? Personally, I don't think we've seen this play out yet. Quite frankly, I think there's going to be more to see and more to do, more to come from, not only the administration, what people there, how they respond to the cartel's reaction. And I think logically speaking, the cartel probably, partially begun to react, but I don't think they know exactly how they're going to respond to all this yet. So I would see this as definitely something, on the horizon that we'll probably experience here in the U.S. with regard to that immigration, that asylum seeking.
This is something I've been thinking about just as a narcotics investigator. We responded to a lot of fentanyl overdoses and just came to really understand the lethality of fentanyl and how potent it is and just virtually undetectable. So I just kind of started thinking to myself, if these organizations who are in fact producing this fentanyl are employing terrorist tactics, are they going to be starting to use fentanyl as a weapon of mass destruction? And unfortunately, I don't think it's that far-fetched, and that could come to fruition in many different ways. Just one thing I think about, this happened in Eastern Europe, but simply put in a kilo of fentanyl just in a HVAC, right, in a government building and letting it disperse, how the amount of damage that could do immediately and long term would almost be unfathomable. So that's just kind of food for thought on my end that unfortunately that could be a possibility. I don't know if you guys have any thoughts or have any examples of this already kind of happening.
Sorry, Jeff, did you say that you actually heard of this happening in Eastern Europe?
Yes, yeah, it was. There was an instance. I want to say it was in Russia or Ukraine where an HVAC was used to achieve a political goal.
Oh, but not specifically with fentanyl. It was with
no. It was with fentanyl.
Oh,
yeah,
terrifying.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's kind of always been the concern due to the such the small amount. And I know that whenever you hear how many kilos of fentanyl taken, take out the entire state of Texas, it could kill the entire country of the United States tenfold. So, do you have any other details on this attack that in Europe?
I don't. I can't speak on the exact circumstances of it, unfortunately, but I know it was a tactic that was employed. And maybe just from my experiences working fentanyl related investigation, just to kind of quantify just the lethality of a drug for somebody who may not be as familiar. So 2 milligrams would be considered a lethal dose. So there's 1,000 milligrams in 1 gram of any substance, right? So just to quantify what a gram looks like, a gram is like a sugar packet or a sweet and low packet. So there's 500 lethal doses essentially in one sugar packet that could drop even a chronic user, right? So somebody who's an addict and uses regularly 2 milligrams is enough to make somebody overdose and die, right? Your respiration is going to drop and your breathing's going to stop pretty instantly. So there's been, many examples, and this is just one of them, of cartels and foreign terrorist organizations partnering together. In the early 2000s, Hezbollah and La Oficina Envigado, which was a major Colombian cartel, was smuggling cocaine, into the Middle East, and also laundering money to finance the activities of Hezbollah. 36 people ended up being arrested in 2008 with this connection between Lebanon and Colombia. The investigation kind of continued in 2016, really targeting the money couriers, right? Because historically, if you really want to cripple an organization, it's by hurting their finances. So, and we're talking, millions and millions of dollars that were being laundered just to benefit Hezbollah to fund their operations. So this was really an example of true narcoterrorism. It was a hybrid. You have the organized crime, expertise of smuggling and laundering money with the experts on violence, inciting violence. So that's a very dangerous combination, and that's where these cartels really learn their tactics from, the violent tactics, or from these terrorist organizations with the videos of the beheadings and chopping off limbs while people were alive. Those were all learned behaviors, in my opinion, that they learned from these terrorist organizations. So kind of shifting to the hot topic, right? How do the cartels fit the definition of foreign terrorist organization, and why these cartels were designated as FTOs by the current administration. So the Anti-Terrorism Act of '96 gave the Secretary of State the authority to designate an organization as an FTO upon determining it's a foreign organization that engages in terrorist activity, including hijacking, assassination, and use of biological, chemical weapons, chemical agents, among other activities, or terrorism, premeditated, politically motivated violence. And the terrorist activity or terrorism threat threatens U.S. national security. So if we look closely at those three criteria, I think it'd be hard to argue that cartels do not fit those criteria, and they align with that very much so. So present day again, the current administration, designated specific TCOs as FTOs. So you have the TDA in Venezuela, MS-13, Sinaloa cartel, Cartel de Jalisco, Nueva Generación, CJNG, CDN, Nueva Familia Michoacana, and Carteles Unidos, and Cartel de Golfo, the CDG. So except for the Carteles Unidos, those organizations had previously been designated pursuant to counter narcotics or TCO authorities. I know prior to this, and I believe the governor in Mexico was very vocal about naming the cartels as well as FTOs. There's kind of a little chart that shows a lot of the similarities again between the FTOs and cartels. A lot of them have the violent extreme ideology, right? For supremacy, the beheadings, the limb cutting, the recruiting techniques. They use the internet and especially now social media to spread their message and recruit at home and abroad. And even previously, terrorist organizations were producing poppy to produce heroin to finance their operations. And cooperators of both terrorist organizations and cartels are both fearful for cooperating with law enforcement, fear of retaliation. So as you can see here, they both use extreme violence. Typically, the FTOs are just seek to overthrow a government. That's not really in the cartel privy, though they do try to influence politics that kind of fit their goals. Both cartels and terrorist organizations, they're constantly fighting for territory. Terrorist organizations, you have the tribes, the factions, just like within the cartels, you have the different organizations fighting for territory to allow for smuggling through those routes. Both do try to blend in with civilians, but as we kind of talked about before, the younger generation, the junior narcos like to be a little more outward and flaunt their lifestyle. Both recruit abroad. They both provide material support. Our Americans provide material support to these organizations, and both attempt to influence governments, like I was saying before.
Yeah, obviously they're going to try to, have extreme influence on governments. And I think it overlaps a little bit with the seek to overthrow the government. I mean, certainly in terms of what we see from other foreign states and, acts of coups, where they're trying to overthrow the government here. I mean, you've spoken to it before with the use of extreme violence, and we've seen it throughout history in Mexico. If somebody speaks out against the cartels, and it'll be interesting moving forward if we will see more of this. But I would expect even more extreme violence forthcoming from the cartels in terms of trying to transition the current government and the current stance on the cartels as this administration applies more and more pressure on Mexico. What does that action look like? And I don't wonder if it will increase maybe the definition or what we think this definition might look like in terms of seeking to overthrow the government, or parts of some of the state governments where these cartels, where their mainstay is, right, where they have that stronghold, where before it was an influence. And I'm wondering if it's just going to be more aggressive as this administration continues to put more pressure on the Mexico government themselves in order to have them act where otherwise they may not have acted, and what the cartel response to that will be. So I think there's more to come for sure.
Yeah.
It's interesting you say that, Bob. I was going to mention something very similar, that the concept of exerting extraordinary influence over the government is, especially in this case, it's a very, very close shadow of overthrowing of the government. And I think we're starting to see with the assassinations of regional leaders, regional governmental leaders, that although they may not want to overthrow the entire government in the same way that an ideological terrorist group does, if there are leaders that aren't playing ball with the cartels, they're going to seek to overthrow those individuals and replace them with ones that are going to cooperate with them. So we're moving much closer to maybe not a total overthrow of the government like you would see in a sort of a military coup, or like with the Taliban taking over the government of Afghanistan, but a sort of gradual, piece by piece overthrow of the government entity that disallows this business to continue.
I think we may see the potentially the theater shift. So what I've been hearing from pretty credible sources is a lot of the operations now are shifting to Canada, and going virtually undetected, because you have, think about 5,000 miles of border between the US and Canada. So a lot of the specifically fentanyl labs have been moving to Canada, specifically kind of on the western side. Also, you have the port of Vancouver, and a lot of the precursor chemicals for fentanyl, like 4-ANP, are coming through there. Interesting statistic I heard that the other day was about only 1% of all cargo coming through the Vancouver port is actually inspected. So we may see an increase in cartel activity, and then not only that, but aligning themselves with other criminal organizations. Somebody like the Hells Angels has a very big presence in Canada, just working in conjunction with them for the already kind of pre-existing criminal networks they have in Canada. Here's some, again, these are kind of just my opinions. The designation of the TCOs as FTOs, it's so new that it's hard to say what are actually pros and cons. These are just things from my experiences I foresee as being pros and cons. So one of them obviously would be using military resources in Mexico, and enhancing the tools for law enforcement as a whole. Designating now these people as enemy combatants. And I think we can say there has been a decrease of drugs into the US, maybe specifically on right here on the southwest border. I know the seizures are down, but again, that may be just due to the fact that they're adapting, the organizations are adapting, and then again moving their operations elsewhere to somewhere like Canada. And then another pro, Laurit's kind of touched on it earlier about interagency collaboration and intelligence sharing, as a result of enhanced capabilities and resources. But kind of a sub thing that goes along with this is you always have to think about the bureaucratic imperative, which we of course would like to think it isn't an issue, but maybe with increased funding and increased resources, there sometimes can be a tendency for agencies, right, to compete for this money, right, and supremacy. So that can sometimes hinder potentially the sharing and collaboration of intelligence. But that was the thought process kind of pre 9/11. I'd like to think with the introduction of the fusion centers and such a catastrophic intelligence failure like 9/11, that the bureaucratic imperative has since dissipated. Again, some cons, we talked about it earlier. Asylum seekers, flooding the US because of any military violence that's going on. Of course, if we were to take military action in Mexico, this may undermine Mexico's sovereignty and independence. Another thing to think about is, do we even have the resources and the capability to commit more counterterrorism agents and law enforcement officers to investigating these TCOs? How is this going to affect U.S. Mexico, trade relations, NAFTA, and just valuable resources that we get from Mexico, right? We get a lot of our produce and flowers and goods. So if relations are strained, what's that going to look like for our supply chain? Are we going to have a lot of inflation? Are we going to have a shortage? Simple supply and demand issues that are going to drive up prices for U.S. citizens. Another issue is potentially material support is broadly defined. So when we're investigating these TCOs as FTOs, how do we differentiate from people who have been extorted? Like, hey, if you don't launder money through your business, we're going to burn your business down. We'd like to think, it's simple enough that stuff would come out during an investigation, but it's not always so black and white, right? If there's not any type of paper trail that shows this type of extortion went on. And then another thing I was just kind of thinking about is, like, how do we hold China accountable for supplying these precursor chemicals, and what does that look like, and how does that also strain economic relations between China and the U.S.?
I wanted to throw something out there, and neither as a pro nor a con, but more as somewhat of a filter through which we can examine those pros and cons. So I still, I guess I could say I dabble in narcotics, because HSI San Diego maintains a 24/7, 365 days a year presence to respond to smuggling incidents along the border. So every now and again, I'll participate in a some sort of reactive criminal investigation of narcotic smuggling. And I recently testified, I think it was a couple of weeks ago. I took over a case for a colleague and testified in court about, on a narcotic smuggling case. And in this particular case, amongst other drugs, there was I want to say there was about, plus or minus, there were about 35 kilograms of fentanyl were smuggled into the U.S. Now, Jeff, I think I recall you saying that a lethal dose was about 500, that within a 1 gram of 1 gram of fentanyl, there were approximately 500. I'm sorry, 500 lethal doses.
Correct.
So if my math is correct, a seizure of about 35 kilograms comes out to about 17.5 million lethal doses of fentanyl. And that's a seizure that the U.S. government, the Department of Homeland Security, grabbed and took off the street. But it's only one of many, and it's not uncommon at all. Even now, with a decrease in the number of seizures, it's not uncommon to see 20, 30, 40 grams or kilograms of fentanyl coming in. So that's something I think we need to keep in mind when we're balancing, figuring out, well, how are we going to tackle this? Is it a good thing to designate cartels as FTOs? Is it not? How is it going to require us to shift resources? What things can we do? We have to keep in mind that the ultimate goal in that is to keep those narcotics out of someone's body and keep them from dying from an overdose. And when we're in one single seizure, one single case has 17.5 million potentially lethal doses. That's an important lens to view it through.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you for that. And one thing I forgot to mention regarding the TCOs as FTOs, I believe the first case was prosecuted in May here in San Diego. or at least the first case for San Diego County, as far as prosecuting TCOs under this act. So it was members of the Beltran Levia organization who are aligned with Sinaloa cartel. So there were several indictments that came down for providing material support to a terrorist organization. So that was pretty cool to see that happen right here in our city, that the law is actually being enforced and going forward. So I don't think necessarily the case has been adjudicated. I don't know how much criminal proceedings have happened, but I at least know that the indictments have gone forward, which is pretty cool to see.
Yeah, I think that was the first in our nation.
Yeah.
Here in the Southern District. Yeah.
Yeah, that AUSA, Adam Gordon, he's kind of an expert when it comes to specifically fentanyl type investigations. So I know in that particular one, I believe at one point about 1,500 kilos of fentanyl was seized during one of the operations. So that amounts to about over 1.5 tons of fentanyl. So I believe at the time that was, one of the largest seizures in the history of the world. So
yeah,
pretty cool case.
I would anticipate that happening more. I've worked with now U.S. Attorney Gordon on drug cases before, and so I would anticipate and hope that they would continue to leverage the power of these laws to bring some of these organizations and the people working for them to account for what they're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm gonna try and play this video, so please let me know if it works.
Shootings that happened over the last 2 months.
And they're now believed to be linked to drug violence south of the border involving the cartel. Our Zara Barker starts us off with the details of this new connection.
3 shootings, including a deadly one, steps from the UTC Mall, are reportedly being connected to the Mexican drug cartel. Our partners from the San Diego Union Tribune report the shootings targeted members linked to the remnants of the Arellano Felix Organization, or AFO, an alleged cartel in Tijuana disbanded years ago by federal authorities in San Diego.
We're not that far from the border, so what goes on in Tijuana and a lot of the border cities will transpose itself up here into our neck of the woods.
Jack Strumsky, a retired police officer with experience of investigations that involved AFO, says this cross-border connection is not a shock.
By no stretch of the imagination am I surprised. This is quite common, and it's nefarious, but they get away with it.
He says investigations like this take a lot of manpower to get people with information to come forward.
It's very difficult. It's very time consuming. It's nothing quick and oriented for quick turnover. Yeah, a lot of these take long-term undercover investigations.
The first connected deadly shooting happened on February 17th outside this luxury apartment complex, steps from UTC Mall in University City. 35-year-old Christian Espinoza Silver, a Mexican citizen allegedly involved with remnants of the AFO, was killed. Police have not yet announced any arrest. And in March, 2 shootings just hours apart were connected, according to our reporting partners. The first shooting outside a Chili's restaurant reportedly wounded James Brian Corona, someone Baja California officials referred to as one of the main generators of violence south of the border. Then 2 people were shot in the head at an Otay Rancho luxury apartment complex. 2 15-year-old boys have been arrested for that incident. Chula.
So, yeah, those cartel-related incidents happened in Chula Vista. So obviously that kind of hits home, right in our backyard. That violence is spilling over, and that was just last year.
So, Jeff, have you guys seen an increase in violence since the FTO designation? Or is it things are too soon? Or?
Yeah, I think it's too soon to say. Nothing that stands out off the top of my head in the last few months, specifically in Chula Vista. No.
Okay, yeah, just curious if you'd seen anything recently.
Well, it's funny because Jeff, you're saying this is right in our backyard. and the execution that happened that with this one that happened probably about 150 yards from my old house.
Yeah, yeah, I remember.
And then the ultralights smuggling operation that, I mean, that's within maybe a mile of each of us,
Yep.
maybe two. So I remember rolling lights and sirens to try to intercept them. So it's definitely some very much in our backyard, front yard, side yard.
Yep.
And one of the things I wanted to bring up, just kind of your projection of them transitioning over into Canada, from the intel that you've been receiving. Just a quick Google search. San Diego County area has 16,000 agents, where all of the U.S.-Canada border only has 6,000.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, it is a simple math equation to say,
Yeah. The
where are we
manpower.
going to do this?
Yeah, it's a manpower issue, for sure. So I don't think that's been figured out, but you know, the cartels could see around the corner. Like I don't think it was something where they just shifted as a result of Trump being elected recently. You know, from my understanding, but the shift almost started during his first term, because they knew he'd be kind of clamping down.
You know, something to keep in mind is these organizations, you know, we're looking at them through the lens of, you know, a terrorist organization, but they're businesses also. They're, you know, they employ people who are really good at business, who are strategic thinkers and look around the corner, often better than we do within the, you know, the large bureaucracy that is the U.S. government. Not that I'm knocking the government, but you know, we have a lot more to cover than, for example, a cartel. And so when you think about them being businesses, it makes complete sense that they're starting to diversify. They're going into other areas, other, you know, sort of other funding streams, sources of income, but also identifying other areas in which they can bring narcotics to their, you know, chief clientele, their chief market, which is here in the U.S. So it makes sense that they're, you know, we know for a fact that they learn from what we do. So they're modifying what they do in response, not just to what we have done and are doing, but in what they are using common sense and business savvy to anticipate that we'll do in the future. So that's not surprising at all that they've already begun to move towards some other, you know, another avenue of ingress into the U.S.
Yeah. But yeah, thank you guys very much. It really is an honor to participate in this. I'm really humble and just learned a lot from the conversations, you know, we've had today and leading up to this, and just really enjoyed this. And just a side note, that picture of Lily there, Lily was supposed to be a drug dog. She failed miserably. She's a drug dog dropout. She was too sweet, and she couldn't be trained, so now she's a pet. She still runs some cars every now and again, which is kind of funny to see. But yeah, that's Lily. She's a pet. That's our little photo shoot that we had there.